Hello amigos, thanks for coming. Today we're gonna see how I re-edited one of my favorite images, which is this one taken at Niagara Falls over 9 years ago. And we're gonna do something a little bit different. Instead of starting with the raw file and you seeing me move all the controls and applying local edits and so on, I'm going to show you the final result of my edit, and then we're gonna turn off all the controls in Lightroom, all the different modules, and then one at a time we're gonna enable them to see the effect and why I was doing each one of those things. Hopefully this approach is a little bit faster and you'll find a little bit more interesting than just watching me over my shoulder move controls for 15 or 20 minutes. So this is the image that I took at Niagara Falls. I love this image with the water, the rock, and the small bird with the wings up. I think it's the little bird that makes the photo. This image, as I mentioned, I took at Niagara Falls. And my wife and I had the opportunity to do a helicopter tour, and we were up on the helicopter. I was photographing down, and the image that I took is in this section right here where you see the rocks. Now, how do we get there? Well, like most tourists, we got on the boat and they gave us a vinyl poncho. I had my camera under it, protecting it from all the mist. I got to the edge of the boat, and as the boat was moving around the waterfalls and I saw something interesting, I'll take my camera out, I'll shoot a number of frames in high-speed shutter, and I'll take it down, cover it, clean the lens, and start all over again. And when I saw the birds moving in that direction and the rocks, I thought that maybe I was going to be able to get something interesting, and I did. So the raw file that came from the camera is this one. There are a couple of issues with this raw file. One, with all the mist, there's very little contrast. You think the colors are all washed out. We also have this section where we just run out of waterfall. It's just rocks. And we can improve the composition a bit. Also, although this photo was taken at ISO 640 with a camera Canon 7D2 from 9 years ago, there's a little bit of grain. And when I correct the photo and use DEHAZE in Lightroom, which tries to apply the physics of how light transmits through fog, for example, it's going to apply a lot of contrast and it's going to apply saturation. And that's going to make the grain a lot more visible. So we had to deal with that first. The rock and the bird could be a little sharper. Because I needed to do both things, I went to Topaz Photo AI, one of my favorite plugins. And in Topaz Photo AI, I used denoise to remove the noise, and I also use sharpen, apply a mask to apply sharpen to the top of the rock and to the bird, and just apply a touch of sharpen, not too much. And brought back a DNG into Lightroom, and this is the DNG. Clean, no grain, and a little bit more detail on the bird and on the rock. And then I started doing edits from scratch using that clean DNG as the foundation. And my edits resulted in this new image. I crop it a little bit differently, and I tried to intensify the blues, added light, detail, and color to the rock and to the bird, to make it pop out of the image. And this is the resulting image. You also saw that I corrected this corner where basically we had run out of water. So this is the resulting image. This is the image. I end up cropping a bit and applying some global edits. So with the global edits, this is what you can see. And basically I reduced the shadows. I just noticed I left my menus in Spanish because I was recording in Spanish. So I'm gonna reset and come back to this position. Okay, back in English. Sorry, I had to restart Lightroom. As I was telling you, the global edits made a big change on the image by reducing the shadows, reducing the blacks quite a bit, and more important, moving the dehaze slider to the right about 40 points, and also moving the vibrance. That basically gave me a lot more intensity to the colors and a lot more contrast. Just with global effects, as you can see, that was a huge change. Next thing I wanted to do was, we have this section on the upper left where we have a big destruction. For that, I went to the remove area. And I used the standard heel brush, the one that has been in Lightroom for quite a few times, and I used a series of brushes on top of each other, borrowing from other sections of the top of the image to try to give me something that will look natural. So if I enable those corrections, that's what I ended up with. So this is before, this is after. I didn't have to use content aware fill or generative AI. I tried, but the results that I got were not very good. So I ended up using the old trusted heel brush. And as you can see, I used a number of them that I end up overlapping and playing with the opacity to give me something that looked natural to me. After these foundational edits, now it was time to apply masks. And I have a series of masks. The first one, I'm going to turn it on, was using the select subject and refining that mask. I selected the top of the rock and the bird. And basically, I gave them a little more light, more detail using texture and using clarity. And just by that, it catches our attention. Remember, light, color, and detail is what's going to get our attention. On the next mask, I used luminance range to select the whites and the highlights. And as you can see, this is the mask area. And what I wanted to do is reduce the saturation, but increase the value of the highlights and the whites a little bit to make them pop a little bit more. This is without and with. Next one, I did kind of the opposite with the blues. And this time I used the color range mask to select the turquoise and bluish color on the image. And I reduced the exposure a bit and I increased the saturation. Basically trying to intensify those colors a little bit more. And you can see the effect there. Now we needed to pay attention to different parts of the image. One of them is that the upper left column was a little bit dark. I used a radial gradient to select an area in that corner and just give it the highlights up, the shadows up, the whites up to basically balance the tonality in that area with the rest of the image on the top of the image. So I think if I turn it off, it will look too dark. Now it looks better balanced. I end up doing kind of the opposite to the bottom right because that area for me was a little too bright. So I used another radial gradient, but this time I toned down the highlights and the whites. We're almost done with masks. One more mask. I used the object mask to select the bird and warm it up a bit, because you can see the bird is on top of a darker area that is more cold, bluish, so I wanted to stand out a little bit more. So I just warm it up a bit and I increased the highlights of the bird just a touch. And finally, I used two radial gradients, one in this area and one on the bird, selecting the two main areas of the image, and I increased the contrast and I increased the highlights a little bit more to try to get our eyes a little bit more into those parts of the image. If I turn off all the masks, this was before the mask and this is with. Before and with. And as you can see, by using a series of masks and using the flexibility of masks in Lightroom, I'm able to guide the attention to different parts of the image by playing with light, color, and detail. Well, after doing a number of local edits, there is the danger that we end up with things that don't connect. We need to have one image that connects well. Sometimes that requires going back to basics and playing with highlights and whites and shadows to try to balance the image a little bit more. For this image, I did two different things. One was with the color mixer. I basically increased the luminance of the oranges and the yellows to try to get the top of the rock and the bird to pop a little bit more. The second thing I did was in color grading to warm up the highlights and cool down the shadows. Just a touch. If I turn it off and on, I think it's going to be a little more visible on the rock, but does the effect of basically warming up the highlights and cooling down the shadows. I didn't do anything with the middle tones. And finally, I sharpened the image. And basically I use a mask to only select the important areas of the image on the rock and on the bird. And I adjusted the amount and the detail slider a bit to give me a good amount of detail. Well, amigos, this is a different approach that I call the RAW autopsy. I don't know if you like this approach better than the standard approach of watching over my shoulder as I edit the image from scratch. Let me know which one you like better. That way I know what to do in the future. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Help me grow the channel. Subscribe, comment, tell your friends, and I'll see you next time.